You ever wonder why the truth always comes dressed like a lunatic? Why the liars get the spotlight and the truth tellers get the straitjacket? It's funny, isn't it? How the world rewards those who deceive with smiles, applause, and influence, while those who try to wake you up are called paranoid, dramatic, or crazy. You've been fed stories, polished ones, rehearsed to perfection, sold to you in shiny packages. They tell you what's good, what's evil, who to trust, what to fear, and you bought it, didn't you? You bought it because it was comfortable, because it was easy, because it made the noise in your head quiet for a while. But deep down, you know something's off. You can feel it crawling under your skin. That sense that everything you've been told might be a carefully designed lie. They built this illusion so beautifully, didn't they? Like a painter who knows exactly where to add a shadow, where to draw your eyes, how to make you feel safe, even when the world beneath you is burning. They dressed it up in comfort, wrapped it in certainty, and called it truth. And you swallowed it, gladly, because it made life simpler. Because the illusion was easier to live within the ugly, unfiltered chaos of reality. They needed you calm, obedient, predictable, so they gave you distractions, screens, routines, 1,000 rules that made you feel like you were part of something structured, something stable. And all the while, they took what they needed: your time, your mind, your quiet submission. You think freedom means choosing between this or that, left or right, buy or don't buy, agree or disagree. But real freedom terrifies them. Real freedom means you start asking why. It means you stop believing what's handed to you in neat, smiling packages. The illusion isn't built to withstand questions. It's fragile, like glass. That's why they keep you entertained, confused, divided, scared. As long as you're reacting, you're not thinking. As long as you're fighting shadows, you'll never look at the hands casting them. The illusion works because it flatters you. It tells you that you're informed, moral good. It whispers that you already know enough, that there's no need to look deeper. They feed you lies dressed as virtue, and you defend them because they make you feel righteous. That's the trap. They don't need to control you with chains. They've given you comfort instead. You sit quietly in your cage, convinced you're free because you can decorate the walls. You were never meant to see beyond it. You were meant to stay content, docile, predictable. They built the illusion so carefully that even when cracks begin to form, you doubt your own eyes. You question your sanity before you question the structure. That's how deep it goes. It started the day you were born. Little by little, they shaped your mind. What to believe, what to fear, who to trust. They gave you heroes and villains, told you what success should look like, how happiness should feel, what kind of people are right. You were trained to play your part, to fit their mold. And every time you tried to step outside it, the world laughed, mocked, corrected you. You were herded back into the illusion, told that rebellion was dangerous, that questioning was foolish. They told you to be realistic, but realistic just means obedient in disguise. You've seen glimpses, haven't you? Little moments when something felt off, when you realized people don't really care about truth, only about validation. When you saw someone punished not for lying, but for exposing one. Those moments you felt the ground shift under you. That quiet whisper in your mind saying, something's wrong here. But you silenced it, didn't you? Because it's easier to stay asleep than to wake up in a burning room. Easier to pretend the fire isn't real if everyone else is still smiling. They fed on your silence. Every time you stayed quiet, every time you looked away, every time you told yourself, someone else will handle it, they grew stronger. Because silence is the currency of control. They don't fear your anger, they fear your awareness. They fear the day you stop reacting emotionally and start seeing logically. Because once you see the illusion for what it is, it loses its power. The curtain falls, the magician's trick collapses, and the audience stops clapping. You weren't meant to serve, but you've been serving all along. You've been the worker, the product, the experiment, the obedient participant in a play you didn't write. But here's the twisted brilliance. You think you chose this. You think your beliefs, your habits, your opinions are your own. But they're not. They were planted, nurtured, cultivated, and you watered them with your trust. You protected them like they were sacred. You built your identity around someone else's design. And now, even when you begin to suspect it, even when you start to see the cracks in the illusion, fear stops you. Fear of being alone, of being mocked, of losing everything that gave your life shape. But isn't that the funniest part? You're terrified of losing something that was never real. You're protecting a lie because you've lived with it so long that truth feels foreign. They knew that would happen. They counted on it. They didn't just build the illusion around you. They built it inside you. You think the walls are around you, but they're not. They're in your mind, your beliefs, your emotions. That's why breaking free hurts. It's not the world collapsing. It's you tearing down the walls they made you believe were part of who you are. You were never calm by nature. They taught you calmness to control your chaos. But that chaos, that spark of rebellion, that voice that whispers no, that's the only thing that was ever truly yours. That's what they fear most. They fooled you by using the simplest trick in the book. They made you feel guilty for questioning. They told you it was wrong to doubt, wrong to push back, wrong to think differently. They used morality as a leash and fear as a muzzle. They told you that being good means obeying, and being bad means resisting. They conditioned you to associate obedience with peace and rebellion with destruction. So you stopped fighting. You stopped asking. You stopped looking. You turned yourself into a spectator of your own life, applauding the same performance that keeps you chained. They don't need to force you anymore, because they've made you police yourself. Every time a thought rises that challenges the system, you kill it before it breathes. You laugh it off, call it paranoia, conspiracy, madness. Because they've taught you that anyone who questions must be insane. You defend the very system that exploits you, mock the people who try to wake you, and call it rationality. That's how deeply they've programmed you. You became their perfect creation, the prisoner who guards his own cell. The lies they feed you are wrapped in logic. They don't just lie. They explain their lies. They give you data, statistics, experts, credentials, and you swallow them without chewing because the truth doesn't come in suits and microphones. It comes in whispers and chaos. But chaos frightens you, doesn't it? They made sure of that. They made you believe that order equals safety, and that questioning order equals madness. So you cling to their structure, even when it bleeds you dry. You beg for clarity, and they hand you more illusions. You ask for meaning, and they sell you distractions. You think you're consuming information, but it's consuming you. They created a world where being busy is more respected than being awake. You work harder than ever, but not for yourself. You chase goals that aren't yours. You measure your worth by numbers on a screen, approval from strangers, fake smiles, and filtered lives. They tell you to be yourself, as long as yourself fits their template. They give you just enough freedom to believe you have it. That's the genius of control. Give people the illusion of choice, and they'll never notice the cage. You see it in how people react to truth. They don't want to hear it. Truth doesn't comfort, it cracks. It exposes, it hurts. Lies are warm, familiar, safe. Truth is the stranger knocking at your door at 3 a.m. Lies let you sleep. Truth keeps you awake. That's why they keep lying. Not because you can't handle the truth, but because you don't want to. They built a world where truth feels like an intruder and lies feel like home. And when someone dares to speak it, the crowd turns on them. That's part of the design. The system defends itself through its victims. The controlled defend their controllers. You don't need soldiers when the minds of the people do the work for you. That's why those who see are ridiculed, because the blind feel safer together. And deep down, you know that stepping out of that herd means isolation, judgment, pain. You've seen it happen. You've probably even helped enforce it once or twice, didn't you? Not out of malice, but out of fear. Because when someone starts tearing at the illusion, it threatens everyone's comfort. They told you, trust the process. But whose process is it? They told you. Everything happens for a reason. But whose reason are you living by? You keep waiting for things to make sense, for justice, for fairness. But this world was never built to be fair. It was built to be useful. Useful for the few, controlled for the many. They trained you to see corruption as politics, cruelty as discipline, and manipulation as marketing. You laugh at it when it's a joke online, but it's not funny when you realize it's your life being consumed quietly while you scroll through distractions. You've been told that one day it'll all make sense, that if you just keep playing by the rules, you'll win. But that day never comes, does it? Because the rules aren't made to let you win. They're made to keep you playing. You keep giving your time, your energy, your hope, and in return, they give you noise. Enough to keep you busy, not enough to wake you up. The game doesn't end, it resets. Over and over, every generation born, thinking they'll be the one to change it. Yet every generation ends up repeating the same cycle. Distracted, obedient, numb. But you feel it now, don't you? That strange heaviness. That voice that says, something's wrong here. It's not paranoia. It's awareness, trying to break through the layers they've buried it under. You've been trained to doubt it, to silence it. But the more you ignore it, the louder it becomes. It's the part of you that still remembers what truth feels like. Raw, unpolished, dangerous. They can control your environment, your information, even your emotions. But they can't kill that spark completely. They can only bury it under guilt, shame, and fear. They convinced you that being numb is strength, that caring too much is weakness, that detachment is wisdom. They made you believe that survival means conformity, that blending in means success. But deep down, you know the truth. You're not supposed to blend in. You were never supposed to live half awake, following a script someone else wrote. You weren't meant to exist just to make others comfortable. You were meant to see, to question, to tear through the illusion and feel everything they told you to suppress. They lied when they told you that peace comes from silence. They trained you to believe that keeping quiet means you're strong, that walking away makes you wise, that not reacting makes you mature. But tell me, who benefits from your silence? Who profits when you swallow your words? Your anger, your truth. Because it's not you. You think silence keeps you safe, but all it does is keep you obedient. You weren't made to be quiet. You were made to question. And the moment you stop speaking, that's the moment you start disappearing. You can feel it, can't you? That tightness in your chest when something feels wrong, but you say nothing. That dull ache when you see the lies, but everyone else smiles like it's normal. You tell yourself it's not your place, that you should stay calm, that you shouldn't cause trouble. But deep down, you know the truth. The world doesn't change by those who stay calm. The world changes when someone finally snaps, when someone decides that silence is no longer an option. They call it rebellion, but it's really awakening. You've been told to wait for the right time, to wait for the perfect moment to speak, to act, to live. But the right time never comes, does it? Because waiting is another trick they play. They tell you patience is a virtue, but in their world, patience is control. They want you to wait until you forget what you were waiting for. They want your urgency to rot into comfort, your fire to fade into routine. Every time you tell yourself, not yet, they win. Because not yet eventually becomes never. You've seen how people react when someone finally tells the truth. They panic. They attack. They ridicule. Because truth disrupts the calm illusion they've built around themselves. You become the threat. Not because you're wrong, but because you remind them of everything they've tried to forget. And that's what they fear most, being reminded. They'd rather live in a cage they can predict than step into freedom they can't control. They'd rather stay numb than feel the chaos of being awake. They built a world where truth is optional, a world where lies are currency, and silence is the price of survival. People walk around smiling while their souls rot quietly underneath. They laugh at honesty, mock vulnerability, and worship comfort. Everyone's pretending, and they know it. But they keep pretending anyway, because the illusion feels safer than the mirror. And if you ever dare to stop pretending, they'll call you crazy. Because in a world full of masks, the face that dares to be real looks like madness. You've been made to believe that speaking truth means you'll lose everything. Your job, your friends, your place, your peace. And maybe you will. But what do you gain by staying silent? You keep the illusion sure, but lose your reflection. You keep your seat at the table, but forget your purpose for sitting there. You keep your comfort, but at the cost of your conviction. The truth doesn't cost much. It costs everything. But once you pay that price, you realize it was never a loss. It was liberation. They tell you to play nice, to keep your voice low, to agree even when you disagree, to nod and smile when something inside you is screaming, because they know that if enough people stop pretending, the whole structure collapses. That's why they sell you distraction. That's why they drown you in noise. Because they can't control the silence that comes from awakening. Not the silence of fear, but the silence before the storm. The kind that comes right before someone finally says, enough. It's strange, isn't it? The way they've twisted courage into foolishness. The way they've made speaking the truth seem reckless. They applaud the liars who keep things peaceful and punish the ones who dare to shatter the calm. They'll call you dramatic, negative, extreme, anything but right. Because if you're right, then they're exposed. And they can't handle exposure. They built their entire identity on the illusion of control. You don't just threaten their beliefs. You threaten their comfort, their ego, their false sense of order. You think the world will reward you for playing along. It won't. It never has. The people who changed things, they weren't comfortable, they weren't quiet, and they weren't liked. They were mocked, rejected, labeled insane. But in the end, the same world that hated them needed them. Because truth always outlives the lie. It might get buried for a while, drowned under ridicule and fear, but it never dies. It waits, it watches, and when the time comes, it burns through everything false until all that's left is what's real. Every lie you tolerate becomes a brick in your own prison. Every truth you ignore becomes a whisper in your own head. And one day, that whisper turns into a scream. You can't drown it forever. You can distract yourself, yes. Drown it in pleasure, bury it in work, numb it with screens. But when it's quiet, when no one's around, when it's just you and your thoughts, it starts to surface again. That unease, that feeling that something's off, that's truth trying to breathe again. So the question is, how long can you keep pretending? How long can you keep playing along before the mask fuses to your skin? Because once it does, you don't even remember who you were before the lies. You become the very thing you swore you'd never be. A puppet that smiles while the strings tighten around its neck. You laugh, you joke, you act fine. But deep down, you know it. You've been living a lie, and every time you stay quiet, you give that lie more power. They disguise manipulation as morality. That's the oldest trick in the book. They tell you what's right and wrong. Not because they care about right or wrong, but because they care about control. They wrap the chains in velvet, make the poison taste sweet, and call it virtue. They want you obedient, not awake. They want you ashamed of your instincts, doubtful of your own senses. Because once you start questioning what's real, you stop being a follower. And followers are what they need to keep the game going. You see it everywhere. Rules built not to protect you, but to confine you. They say, be good. But good according to whom? Their definition of good keeps you quiet, predictable, compliant. They tell you that obedience makes you holy, that submission makes you pure. They tell you that questioning is sin, that doubt is rebellion, that resistance is evil. But have you noticed how every evil act they describe just happens to be the one that threatens their power? Convenient, isn't it? They dress it up in language that sounds noble. They talk about peace, about harmony, about keeping order. But their peace depends on your silence. Their harmony depends on your chains. And their order, it's built on fear. The kind of fear that keeps people sitting still while they're burning inside. You start to wonder if what they call light is just another form of blindness. Because when you look too closely, you start seeing the cracks. And once you see them, you can't unsee them. They feed you this moral script, tell you how to act, how to speak, how to think. And you follow because that's what you were taught. To be good, to fit in, to be accepted. But you can't help but feel it, can you? That sick twist in your gut when you follow orders that go against your soul. That subtle shame that comes from living by someone else's truth. They say it's guilt, a sign you've done wrong. But no, that feeling isn't guilt. It's the death of authenticity. It's your real self screaming from under the weight of their expectations. They want you to believe that morality is simple, black and white, no questions allowed. But real morality isn't blind obedience. It's brutal honesty. It's choosing what's right even when it costs you comfort. And that's what they can't stand. Because people who think for themselves can't be controlled. They don't fit in their boxes. Don't kneel to their idols. Don't buy their guilt. And that's dangerous. Because once one person breaks free, others start noticing the cracks in the wall too. It's a system built on guilt. They shame you into compliance, make you confess to crimes you didn't commit. You feel guilty for wanting more, for questioning, for existing outside the lines. They tell you humility means shrinking, that forgiveness means submission, that love means sacrifice. As long as the sacrifice is yours, they weaponize your goodness against you. The kinder you are, the easier you are to control. They make you doubt your own heart until you start policing yourself. They don't even have to watch you anymore. You do it for them. You start to realize their morality was never about good or evil. It was about convenience. It's moral if it benefits them. It's sinful if it threatens them. They rewrite the rules whenever it suits their agenda. And the best part, they make you thank them for it. They've mastered the art of grooming you into compliance. They've convinced you that suffering makes you noble, that silence makes you wise, that obedience makes you safe. And you eat it up because it's easier than thinking. Because thinking means facing the truth, that you've been living a lie dressed as virtue. They tell you to trust authority, to trust the system, to trust the process. But every time you do, you feel a little smaller. Every yes chips away at your integrity. Every men buries another piece of who you were. You look in the mirror and don't recognize the person staring back. You tell yourself you're just doing what's right. But deep down, you know you're just doing what's easy. Because real righteousness isn't comfortable. It's not about fitting in. It's about standing alone when everyone else bows. They built this world on the illusion of morality. They tell you to follow the rules, but they wrote them in disappearing ink. They tell you to serve the truth, but they decide what truth means. They keep you dancing on strings of guilt and fear, whispering that if you just keep obeying, one day you'll be free. But obedience doesn't lead to freedom. It leads to dependency. They've made you believe that questioning them is betrayal. But tell me, if your faith collapses the moment you ask, why? Was it ever faith at all? You've seen what happens when someone breaks the script. They're labeled defiant, dangerous, immoral. They become the villain, the heretic, the outcast. But isn't it strange how history always ends up celebrating the same people it once condemned? The ones who disobeyed, the ones who refused to accept the lie as law. The same system that burns them later builds monuments in their name. Because truth has a funny way of surviving. No matter how much they try to bury it under virtue, you can feel the weight of their lies pressing against your chest, can't you? That pressure to conform, to agree, to smile. You hear their voices in your head. Be good. Be patient. Be quiet. But good for who? Patient for what? Quiet for whose benefit? You know the answer. It's the same every time. The moment you stop letting them define morality, they lose control. Because morality without manipulation is freedom. And freedom